let's dive into the Star Wars news. I will say, not, quote, a lot of news this week, but a lot to dig into from what we did get. We'll get some merchandise, Mando Monday stuff here in a second, but the big headline reads this: Maul and Talon, Tale of Two Darths. Well, maybe, kind of, sort of. So here's the scoop. I'm going to kind of, as always, kind of recap some stuff, and Joseph will dive in, and feel free, Joseph, to dive in on anything that pops up that you want to talk about while I run through a little bit of things. Paul Duncan has the Star Wars Archives 1999 to 2005 coming out. This will cover the prequels and the special editions. He had the first Star Wars archive book, the 77 to 1983. I am fortunate enough to have it, and I say fortunate because it is a giant, heavy, almost small car-sized book that I just have, and it's comforting to just thumb through. And I'm looking forward to this one. I'm going to grab this one too as well. So there's a lot in there, and as often does happen with books, as we know, Joseph, it's coming out soon, which means little clips of the book being posted to Reddit. And this story was originally posted on Reddit, and that link, according to my knowledge, I'm not a Reddit expert, couldn't find it. The links were dead, and this has spawned some wonderful clickbait articles. Flowing on out of it, but we'll just start with the headline here, Joseph. Lucas, quote, plan to use Darth Maul and EU superstar Darth Talon as the main villains in a possible original trilogy follow-up sequel trilogy. A 7, 8, and 9, yes, but a different time, a different era. So let's actually just dive in right to that headline, Joseph, about what that makes you think, feel, wonder, want. Where are you at with that?
Oh, just with what element of it?
Just you scrolling along. Maybe you're doom scrolling. Maybe you're looking for otter pictures on Twitter. I don't know, whatever. And you see that headline: Lucas planned to use Maul and Darth Talon as the main villains in his episode 7, 8, and 9. Where does your mind go?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was doom scrolling and joy poking on social media, whatever you want to call it, and I saw this, and I went through a Star Wars adventure where I needed to fight through the fear and the anger and the negativity to get to the place of joy and hope.
Right. Yes.
Which is, I think, my first reaction, and I don't want to dwell on this because I want to talk about all the fun ideas. I'm always concerned about, as soon as I see a title like that, I'm immediately going to, but where is this actual information from? When did Lucas say it? Who did he say it to? If he's even said it in a modern context, at what point in his own journey is he referring to having come up with this idea? And all that stuff emerged, and we're going to talk about that. So that's my very first thing. Is just like, before I even get into the actual Star Wars ideas, I want to get to the truth of the reporting. And then the other thing for me that was in some of these clickbait articles, some of the social media reaction, not all of it, I am just personally very, very tired of the comparison game. I understand it's a natural thing to do. I have nothing wrong with people picking their favorites. But I'm so interested in the actual ideas that Lucas shared, so much more interested in this is what we could have had, or this is what was behind door 2. And it's just not as simple as that. It's just not as direct as that. And for me, it at some point, it becomes reductive to only talk about Lucas's ideas in contrast to what the sequel trilogy ended up being.
Yeah.
So
full agree.
Yeah, that honestly, that's my first reaction. And then I get into all the Darth Maul, Darth Talon, interesting, Luke, Leia, all the other stuff we're going to talk about, and very, very intrigued by the actual ideas.
Yeah, well, see, I'm very glad you started there, because I think we try to be honest here, and the ForceCenter vibe is always referred to as positive, and you and I have discussed both the positive side of being considered positive and the negative side of being considered too positive. So I had a similar reaction where I didn't even see, I see it and I just go, whatever. And then I see it's from Paul Duncan's books. I'm like, oh, well, I'm looking forward to this book. That's interesting. And you dig in, and then there's a lot of things in this that I'm like, oh, I love this. This is some great stuff. This was to me never going to be in play for what he eventually handed over to Disney, and I'm dying to one day read what he handed over to Disney. But yeah, it just becomes it creates, and you and I have to power through sometimes the defensive nature of just kind of being a human. Sometimes if you love something, you might get defensive. We love the sequel trilogy, no secret about that. And so when I see tweets, oh, this would have been so much cooler, I can immediately look what I just did. I get into a mocking tone. Put up my sword, I put up my dukes, and that's a lesson on us. I want to try to be better first before beating anyone else into submission into my ideas, right? Like, let me work on it. And once I clicked on these stories and was able to put that aside, this was a very fun story to dig into.
Yeah,
with a lot of possibilities and a lot of good things. So, anyways, I all that to say, I think you and I are in a very honest spot, and it's good to share that as in Star Wars fandom this time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, I would separate it between, sometimes I get defensive when I see a hot take that I disagree with, but I let that go because it's subjective. If somebody doesn't like a film I like, yeah, that can be frustrating, but opinions are opinions, and that's just fine. That's a part of this, of just like, I like the sequel trilogy, and it's sometimes difficult when people really, really don't. But there's also the, like, we need to look at facts. Like, that's just so incredibly important to me when talking about Star Wars or anything else in the world. We need to check dates. We need to check sources. We need to know that we know what we're talking about.
Right.
And just for clarity, if people are hearing about this for the first time, this is coming from a relatively recent interview with Lucas, but it's clear that he is talking about ideas that he has had as the sequel trilogy in his mind, changed and morphed, because even part of these ideas that he's describing, he ended up putting in the Clone Wars himself. Mm-hmm. So this was not, yes, this is a recent interview, but this is not him saying, here are all the ideas I handed to Lucasfilm and what they didn't do in 2012.
Right.
And yeah. And we often use Star Wars Newsnet as a resource, and I thought this article in particular, written by Grant Davis, really broke all that down. The actual, where does this come from? What does it mean in the timeline? I thought this article was really well done, so I wanted to shout that out. Kudos to Grant Davis and Star Wars Newsnet for breaking that all down so well.
Oh yeah, absolutely, well said, and a great team over there with the Resistance broadcast, everything they do over there, and it is for years has been just a go-to source of, hey, here's a spot where you can kind of sift through the Star Wars news and dive in as needed, and I definitely agree with you there. A lot of the notes coming from their insightful article here. So let's run through some of the things here. Stop me if you want to get off the escalator at any point, Joe. From this, maybe just me, but I think you touched upon it. Maul's story, just very, very, very similar to what would eventually happen to him in the Clone Wars, including being brought back alive, very upset, and involved in criminal syndicates. It's not as good as your Clone Wars report summaries, but I think it's on there. And also a little bit, these syndicates would kind of work against the stability of what we, call the New Republic. Darth Talon would be his apprentice. Leia would become Chancellor or Supreme Chancellor. Luke would be searching for Order 66 survivors and children with Force potential to rebuild the Jedi Order. Luke and Leia would have to face the new Sith, and Leia would be revealed to be the one to bring balance to the Force. George goes on to discuss that rebuilding the Republic is harder than starting a rebellion or fighting a war. Kind of that winning and ruling are two different things, kind of concept. And as we talked about, this is not necessarily part of what would eventually be in the treatments he gave Disney for the sequel trilogy. So that's kind of just a summary there. We can start diving on in there. So what do you gravitate towards here? There's a lot to dig into.
Yeah. So I think you were saying, like, if this was something that he had made in the early, not I guess the early 2000s, because he was still making the prequels, but if he had turned right around in the prequels and went and made this, there is nothing that I object to in this. I love all of these ideas as themselves. Like, clearly it is talking about being much closer to Return of the Jedi than the sequel trilogy that ended up being made was. But yeah, so a couple of things that I love. I really, really like all the big picture stuff with Leia. I like the way that Leia is being centered, not just because Leia is a great character, but for me, it pulls together, I think, all these threads of the evolving idea of Star Wars, particularly as I interpret it from the outside of a Lucas perspective. Lucas has so many great quotes going back to the era of A New Hope in the original trilogy of, like, Leia's the actual leader. She's the one who actually understands the government, the politics, the rebellion, the galaxy. Yeah. She's the one who actually knows what's going on. Now, Leia is absolutely great in the original trilogy, in that it's seeds of that are there, but she is also like not as elevated as she could be in the original trilogy, right? So there's a part of me where Lucas looking forward and going, I'm going to really take what I believe and take what I put parts of that in the original trilogy, and I'm really going to make that the focus. Leia is going to be the focus. And then I think by saying the real challenge of this time is, how do you rebuild a government and make it just, and how do you fight the reemergence of crime and the Sith, and do it in a just and inclusive way? Like, let's tackle these big challenges. That ties together what he's interested in the prequels of like systems of government, systems of power matter. But then it also kind of ties together the original trilogy where, like, yeah, we are aware of the political reality, but the original trilogy is so focused on the interpersonal dynamics of the rebellion and Vader and the Skywalker family. So to kind of pull all those together and say, Leia is the person who's always been the steadfast hero of the story. So she has to basically, as somebody who is an heir to this mystical heritage of this power of being a Skywalker who is tied to the Force, she has to resolve that for herself in a way that also resolves everything for the galaxy. So it gets away from that criticism that sometimes people have of the original trilogy where, Luke really makes a difference, and so does Anakin by, overthrowing the Emperor. But you can also read it as an interpersonal battle of the Skywalker family. And it seems to me this treatment is, what if Leia had to deal with all of her interpersonal drama of the power of being a Skywalker and also take full responsibility for the fate of the galaxy?
Yeah. Wow. Can we make this? No, I love it. Yeah, because the ideas that are very present, and we always joke that some of the Leia's great traits maybe come out of her not being underwritten, but just like you said, not as elevated as she could be in A New Hope specifically. We always go to the putting the blanket over Luke after losing her planet, but that ended up spinning off into these just great traits and characteristics of this wonderful character. So to have her kind of have to move all that forward, as Lucas says, this is her rebellion, but now to actually her be at the front and center of all that, and then tying into the ideas, it's what I love, what's present in what we do have in this modern era of, once those fireworks start blasting off on Endor, like the real work begins, and how hard that is, because on the I'm not a huge, like, I always talk, I don't want Kenobi to fight a bunch of pirates looking for water on Tatooine, right? Fine, but that's not a big threat to me. Big enough threat. Criminal syndicates on the surface, I'm like, okay, but Sith, the Maul stuff, Sith run criminal syndicates, undercutting the power. Look, even what's going on with Mando out in the Outer Rim of the New Republic. That's very realistic, very much a problem to be dealt with. And then you tie in the dark side through that. Yeah, you got something that Leia's in the right spot to handle.
Yeah. And it sounds like these ideas might have been more explicit if Lucas had ever, made and told this story. But I do think they're ideas that are present in The Rise of Skywalker in particular, that Leia is so mindful, and The Last Jedi, that Leia is so mindful of passing on, to the next generation what she has known. And that idea that really emerges in The Rise of Skywalker is, we are not the solution. We are the spark that fires the rest of the galaxy. And it is that spark of hope that Leia keeps alive and trains the next generation to keep alive, that bursts into this flame of the entire galaxy showing up to fight this fight for themselves. And I think in The Rise of Skywalker, ultimately it is undeniably a militaristic thing. And it's very interesting to think of George making slightly more political movies and doing that, all those same themes, but having it be told in an almost political story of Leia saying, you, the galaxy, have to rise up and, take responsibility, not just for beating the criminals, not just for beating the bad guys, but for deciding who you want to be and figuring out how can we be truly unified as a people. And that's really interesting to me too, that those themes are there, but maybe they would have been more prequel political, like in this version, this idea.
Yeah, even just with the use of Maul or Order 66, things he's probably coming up with these ideas on set for in Revenge of the Sith. Who knows? George is like, yeah, give me my notebook. I got an idea. You're right. This definitely seems like he's answering or continuing conversations he's starting in episodes 1, 2, and 3, which is interesting to me. You and I think the sequel trilogy is in communication with those movies is kind of what we say, but yeah, to have that kind of pick up and not shy away from it. Not that he shied away from the original trilogy. It's just it was a different time, and I think he wanted to make a movie that stood on its own, or whatever you want to say. He got to roll up his sleeves and do really what he wanted with the prequels, and so to have him do that the George way with these characters that we know so well and we grew up with, I would have been intrigued by that. I am intrigued by that.
Yeah. And I think it is also interesting to know that he would have put our characters through the ringer, right? Because there is that kind of push-pull of one can certainly enjoy the end of Return of the Jedi and the Ewoks are happy and the rebellion won and it's a fairy tale and they all lived happily ever after. And it is nice to know that George is like, no, then they have to form a government, which is actually harder than anything they've ever done before. And Luke has to start a new Jedi Order. And congratulations, you restored what was there before. Well, per the prequels, there were problems with what was there before. So how are you going to actually make this new thing better? It's interesting to know George had no problem with putting the classic characters through the ringer in their older age.
Yeah, that would have been interesting. Let's go to the dark side. Maul, Talon. Maul coming back. We got the famous kind of story of Filoni telling the tale of George coming up to him in the hallways and saying, "I got one for you. Maul's back. Go figure it out." I'm sure they had some conversations beyond that, because a lot of this seems to come from this article. Seems to really just mirror and lead to what we get in the Clone Wars and with Maul, including his appearance in Solo, quite frankly, and Crimson Dawn and all that stuff. So let's talk about the Maul of it all, and then that will lead to the Darth Talon of it all. Joseph, what do you think about this Darth Maul use?
Yeah, I love that Filoni story, and I like that the behind the scenes truth, if that Filoni story is true, that George Lucas walked up to Dave Filoni and said, somehow Maul has returned.
Yes.
He's got robot legs. That's it. He's got robot legs. Done. Obviously, there's a little more to it in the story there. I really love that. I love the character of Maul. I love that Lucas was interested in returning to him. Probably just because, hey, cool design, but also like, ooh, all the things that have ended up being explored with Maul. What is that to, have been on a track to do something and then be pushed out of it, And I'm interested to see how that would have expressed itself. That it's an interesting political idea to say, well, the Sith tried to, put on the mask of the legitimate government and then do whatever they want. And that worked well for a while. But what if we were more insidious? What if we looked like, legitimate problems, because the way crime presents itself can be complex, right? It can be very simple. Like those people kidnapped these people for ransom, and the kidnappers are clearly bad people. But with Sith manipulation, you could hide it into like, is there a planet that's impoverished, and you get somebody like a Darth Maul or Darth Talon coming along, going, well, what if you raided the planet next to you, and then you can get into this moral quagmire very, very quickly, manipulated by the Sith of. But they were starving. What's so wrong? They were just fighting for their own life. That's natural. Like, I think there's really interesting things about, what kind of manipulations would Maul and Talon do as crime lords to undermine the New Republic? That particular idea of that, how would they undermine it more than just, overt crime?
Yeah, and it's I don't know, it just really works. That's part of the reason I just love Solo so much. And it's interesting to me that George, even back then, was like, look, I killed this guy off. I'm not saying that he thought that I did that wrong, because I think he believed that was definitely a valuable part of the story. But the fact that he was always like, if he's sitting around with his notepad right here going, all right, I want to tell 7, 8, 9, I need a new villain. You know what? I had Maul there. What can we do with that? What does that represent? I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by that, of just George. George doesn't create Darth Badius. He doesn't create something completely new, that he wants to revisit this. And then they do it because maybe it's because they do it so well in Clone Wars, exceeding my expectations. I was like, Spider Leg Maul, get out of here with that. And I think people would agree. It's one of the best things that they did in Clone Wars, and that they spilled it over into Rebels so well, and turned Maul into something completely new. I loved Maul. I had all the Maul action figures. I probably had a Maul thermos or something too back in '99. And I was one of those, they killed the coolest character. I'm so glad I grew up, number one. But two, I get it. But I would, this is just, it's an interesting thought to me to have George go. Let me go back to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there would have been a lot of interesting things with Maul's perspective on did that Sith plan that Sidious liked so much, did it work or not? And do I have a different one?
Yeah. Let's talk Darth Talon here. I don't know much about Talon. I knew the name, knew the character, knew the look. She's. I even have it on Wikipedia right now. Just scrolling through right now. I don't have opinion either way on Darth Talon. It's interesting. It's keeping in line with George, what he likes to do. I guess the tale is he saw her on the cover of a comic book or something. Was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, I can work with that. Do you have any Talon hot takes, Joseph?
I really just don't, honestly, because I haven't read her source material. And yeah, she's a cool looking villain. It's a great aesthetic, but for me, it's all about the ideas. It would be about what is she in it for? How does her philosophy work with Maul's? Is it a story of both her and Maul trying to restart the Sith rule of two, or is it pulling from, I think, some of her backstory that I read about, of are they like there should be as many Sith as possible, power in numbers, so I would only get excited by how she functioned into this story.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the aesthetic is there. I did an image search for Darth Talon for a thumbnail. I would not suggest doing that. That goes to different places real fast in a Google search. So it's an interesting, popular character. I mean, a lot of people cosplay as her. So it's intriguing to me. I keep using the word intriguing today. It's my word of the day. But yeah, I'm only excited based on the why, as we know. So I'm with you too on that. I'm just more interested about Maul and Maul's relationship with an apprentice. He's not had the best examples of mentorship in his life. And so what kind of mentor would he be? I think we could guess, but also to see what he tries to do with Ezra and where he is a little bit in Rebels. I'm not going to say a softer Maul, but a broken, defeated Maul, but still vengeance filled. So what would he do with someone under his authority and under his thumb is something I'd be interested in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so a lot of interest there. Well, I would love to talk about the Luke thing. This idea of him starting the Jedi Order, which of course is great, but finding survivors of Order 66 and also trying to search out, younglings. So I love this picture that Luke is like, I have restarted the Jedi Order. I have 50-year-olds and 3-year-olds and me. Let's go.
I have support staff in the new generation.
Yeah. Is that interesting to you? Is that exciting to you? The idea that Luke would very quickly after Return of the Jedi restart the Jedi Order in this version of the legend and find Order 66 survivors?
It is, and it would have been more interesting to me at the time. It's interesting overall. I am trying, for the sake of this conversation, to separate what I do love and sometimes am wonderfully frustrated by that we don't have a ton of Luke stuff post Return of the Jedi, right? We have a couple comics references, a book that's all legends that may or may not be true. I just love the idea that Luke goes, great, I'm a Jedi. Now I need to figure out what that is. And before I restart anything, I need to go figure out what I'm restarting. And I need to go on a search. And he's on, I'm fascinated by what could be there in terms of that storytelling. So him diving right back in, and I'm not saying George would just have him like dive right, next day. Great, gather up. Here there's some survivors, but also it's also interesting that again we didn't have the chance in the original trilogy when he's making them to reference Order 66, but to have Luke Skywalker in a movie, say around 2007, 8, 9, 10, I don't know, going, hey, Order 66, we needed that thing we all just saw in the theaters 5 years ago. I know about it, and people survived it, and they've been in hiding, and it's in line with a lot of the stuff going on now, where there's always a Jedi in the corner of the galaxy, and we can find them. But Luke was just he had a destiny that they didn't have, so or a path that they didn't have. So I like that idea of it's not like Luke diving right back in. He's got to go find them. So there's adventure, there is seeking. I just think I like the seeking out knowledge more than the actual assets to help him rebuild.
Yeah. I think I'm really intrigued by what it could have been. That idea of, well, the original trilogy is restoring what was lost, and then having like literal people who lived through what was lost. And would he encounter Jedi who are like, no, we didn't do anything wrong. There were no problems with the Jedi Order. Sidious just got one up on us. And let's just go right back to exactly the way things were. Let's retake the temple. Let's go. And or would it be somebody who's like, kid, I know you went through a journey and you found your Jedi path, but now you're starting an organization that can crumble from the inside. And I know you are on your path, but how can you keep all of us on the path, you know?
Yeah, no, I do know, because that's I'm going to say this carefully, because I know sometimes I take some big general swipes at Legend stuff, so I apologize to Legends fans. But I started to drop out myself in the mid-'90s with the Jedi Academy stuff. It just wasn't pulling me in. I didn't find it as interesting. And by the way, this was before the prequels came out. So, again, there's probably some specific details that I know I'm not referencing, or I know I don't have in my brain. I apologize for that. But the idea of Luke just restarting it business as normal is not interesting to me. But what you're describing, and I think George would, I have a lot of faith that George would not just have Luke go, great, I rented an office and the Jedi Order is back in business, baby. Exact conversations, moments, Jedi that are like, I don't want to be back. I don't want to go back. We failed. Jedi that are like, great, got my saber. Let's go. That is interesting to me. And that is a little bit in line with what I like about the sequel era of him seeking knowledge and learning a little bit more about what he is and what they used to be.
Yeah. Also very interesting to think at whatever point in time, again, this is a modern interview, but we don't know exactly when Lucas had these ideas. We would assume when Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher were a little younger, since it's happening so close to Return of the Jedi. But it's interesting that even Lucas would have that, like, oh yeah, no, he could find, a handful of Jedi who were just totally hiding through the entire Galactic Civil War. Yeah. That's an interesting dynamic. Or to use your word, Ken, intriguing.
I pulled it off the calendar today. Tomorrow is scrumptious. Yeah, and there's some actual, like, there's when he's scribbling these notes down, and if he would have tried to make these movies, when do they set him? You couldn't just say it's 5 years after Return of the Jedi, because the performers are not 5 years after Return of the Jedi.
No.
They're younger, like you said. Would Harrison at this point in his career, would he be open to that? I don't know. It was around the time where he was open to going back as Indiana Jones a fourth time. So I think sometimes Harrison can be unfairly categorized as always crusty, and that's not always the case most of the time. But it would have been interesting to see. And so would that have forced George to move some of these ideas 20 years after Return of the Jedi? It's a big what if. We'll never know. But yeah, that's different than if he had made these in 97 versus 2007.
Yeah, absolutely. Big absolutely to that.
Yeah, so I'm going over my notes here and seeing if there's anything I felt I missed out of this. Anything, there's a lot in here. There's stuff. There's a lot of stuff with Talon that I thought was interesting, about maybe a Snoke-like character, and that's definitely not intended to be Snoke, but being tied into her, and how there is room for a Snoke and First Order backstory even now, what we have. So we know Snoke may have had other apprentices, and that doesn't matter, if he's Palpatine's complete puppet or not. We got some of those answers, but we don't know what exactly happened. So how would you feel about some of these elements popping up in other Star Wars stories? The Rey Sloane of it all, the First Order form going up into power, and other apprentices that were either meant to be instead of Ben Solo or until Ben Solo. There's something there I don't mind.
Yeah. And also just to kind of unpack the Darth Talon, there is some art from Force Awakens, because it seems like in whatever treatment Lucas provided, that she was one of the only elements that survived in his last draft that he handed over to Disney, that she was possibly somebody who was helping to turn Ben to the dark side, and there's some art for that. So it seems like she kind of exists in a couple different possibilities. But
Right.
to your question, I really think this storytelling is juicy. I think kind of the most exciting thing about this to me is I think some of these stories, there's plenty of room in the modern canon for them to be told. I would love books, animated series probably would be my first vote, of the adventures of Luke and Leia. Like, maybe you got Han, but he's going off and doing racing stuff. But this real focus on Luke and Leia and this story of the prequels were the institutions of the Republic and the Jedi being attacked from within and failing from within. The story of the original trilogy is restoring them. Now, the ultimate story, the ultimate challenge is Luke and Leia wrestling with how to best rebuild them. I think you can still tell that story, and then you get to the story in the sequel trilogy of they built something good, but darkness fought back, and this new generation had to rise, because that's the thing that is missing, I think, from this treatment that is a very Star Wars, very George Lucas thing, focus on the new generation. So I feel like that story of Snoke in the First Order and Rey Sloane off in the unknown regions, for sure that. I think individual Luke and Leia working together to start the new Republic, to start the Jedi Order that he does have. I would love that. I'd love some young Ben adventures. I would love, if it is true that Snoke was wounded by Luke, I'd love that story. And I think there's a lot of room to tell them some way, somehow.
Yeah, there is, and we temper our expectations around these parts, and because it will more than just fill out what we don't know. It just would be, I think, a fun chapter in this kind of in this Star Wars story that we all love. Just these years reestablishing footing, and how tough it is. And you talk about rebuilding, but also making better, and how I think Luke probably finally went into, like, I just have the image of Luke going, you know what? Finally ready to start a Jedi Academy. I've got everything down, from the logo and the paper, classes and the planet. That's perfect. I got it all, and what I want to teach, and what I want to kind of get the image, the Jedi in my own image, but it's not mine. It's what I've discovered. And having that go wrong, it just would add weight to what we got going on, and that includes stuff with Leia and the New Republic, and just going a little bit more. So, hey, hopefully one day, and a character like Talon, or someone that represents Talon, would work well. And I would love on a big screen, big Star Wars story, a female villain, right? Just someone who's just nasty and evil and Sith-like. We have Ventress. We have a lot of great examples in Star Wars, but on just a big level, I think that would go over well, and it'd be fun to get that in the story.
Yes, I would love, a dark side woman, big bad on the big screen would be great. I think that the only other thing that I want to say about this, and about like other storytelling with Luke and Leia in this era, I think for me, I really interpret what some of the characters said in the sequel trilogy, in particular Luke saying, and for a long time there was peace, meaning that Luke and Leia did a good job. They set up these institutions, and they did a good job, and it benefited a lot of people. But problems arise, and they need to be dealt with again. I think there's just still a lot of room to tell a kind of a triumphant story of Luke and Leia doing a good job setting things up.
Yeah, what's funny? You hear and you describe that, it's like, that it's almost like he's referring to that trilogy.
For a long time, there was peace. Yeah.
But then we won again, and we were good. We set up the government, we set up the school we wanted, and things were good. Things were made.
And I think a thing for me too is, like, remember 2005, Revenge of the Sith comes out. Lucas says on red carpets, in interviews, I did it. I told the whole story. I told the story of Anakin Skywalker's fall and becoming Darth Vader and his redemption. And then moments later, he made the entire Clone Wars, where he added all of this dimension to Anakin Skywalker. And that's the thing that makes me feel like, even with big characters, when we know the end of their story, there's always room to spend more time with them, and to add more nuance.
I 100% agree, and I'll say beyond just even characters, but eras and rebellions and wars against the Empire. I think you can always add more to the story to just add weight to everything that we already know. So yeah, you and I are in agreement on that. And it seems like George, he always loves revisiting his stories.
He does.
So that is the look at that one. But we got a little bit of figure alerts and Mando Monday's merchandise check-in here. Let's go with the figures first. These look great. Ah, man. So Black Series 6-inch figures coming out in the spring 2021. Here's what we got, Joseph. Asajj Ventress, Moff Gideon, Greef Karga, Mando, Kuiil, and then Crosshair and Hunter. We got some Bad Batch coming. Then we got a new vintage figure. This is the 3 3/4 collection. Something close to your heart. We got Snaggletooth himself, Sutton, in his little half robe, his little bathrobe there. What do you think about these figures? And I'm especially interested in your thoughts on the Bad Batch rolling out.
Oh yeah, no, this is great. This is a threat to my wall space. This is a threat to my corkboard already filling up. Zutton, that's so great. They haven't made a figure of him in a long time. I was reading, and I have such affinity for him being one of the 4 Cantina creatures back in the Kenner days. Kuiil, I just want more Kuiil merchandise everywhere. So that's I'm really excited about Kuiil. Really excited about Ventress. That's a great figure. The Crosshair and Hunter, that just, I don't know, that kind of it fires my excitement because we aren't talking in the general Star Wars community about Bad Batch coming, and knowing that it is coming and kind of wondering how that's going to add to the whole story. Just being reminded of like the Bad Batch is coming, not only in action figure form, but in television form is exciting.
I'm right there with you. I went, it's weird when sometimes the figure news seems to roll in so many different spots. I follow Jedi Business on Instagram. Was it Fly Guy? I follow, and I'll see a picture and be like, what is this? Then I can't even find the news story sometimes. Or our wonderful listeners in our ForceCenter Discord community will post a picture and I'll be like, where's the actual news story about what figures they're real? And I had to track it down. And so I saw Crosshair and Hunter. It probably was Crosshair first. And I didn't know. I literally went, what is that? Is that some purge trooper I didn't know about? I had to click. Oh yeah, that's clones. It's Bad Batch. And this is something that's fresh in my mind, season 7 of Clone Wars. I know the show's coming, but you're right, Joseph. We aren't talking about it. I don't know. That's not a good or bad thing. It's just a thing. And I did look and go, oh yeah. Give me these figures. I think I like them more than I thought. And we always kept saying they're kind of like a G.I. Joe squad. The G.I. Joe collector and me from the 80s is like, oh yeah, different kind of clones. I like this. So yeah, interesting observation.
Yeah, I hope that they eventually get not only these great Black Series, but some a 4-pack vintage figure of the whole Bad Batch. 5-pack with Echo, damn it.
Oh, yeah, you got to include Echo in there. So, yeah, those are coming on out there. I love, I threw in the Snaggletooth because, again, that's what we knew. That's what we knew. But I just love kind of revisiting those characters and you being a fan of the vintage. Not to get too deep on it there, Justin, but to see these characters, to see them in the modern era and repackaged and looking so great, that's got to make the inner kid very happy, right?
Oh yeah, very much so. And it's just part of the fun, weird legacy of Star Wars of this very minor background character still resonating to the point where it's like announcement on the internet. New, incredibly detailed action figure of a very small background character from a film in 1977. It's just the weirdness of Star Wars, and I love it.
And I'm very happy Zutton has a name, but again, I grew up calling him Snaggletooth. So, and I love kind of that spirit of paying homage to that kind of time in our Star Wars fandoms, with even some of the stuff on Mandalorian with some of the character names. All right. Speaking of Mando Monday, so they did the Mando download. You got the character posters. A lot of people excited, as they should be, for Bo-Katan, Costa Reeves, Axe Wovis, great hero shots there. I like the little concept one they released of Baby Yoda trying in vain to eat an octopus chowder bowl octopus. Any favorites for you in this batch?
Oh yeah, I liked the weird woodcut of the sign of Pelimoto's Docking Bay 35. I don't have room physically for all these things, but I love some things that go beyond toys or clothes to things that are just like, hey, buy this actual thing from the world,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. As I've gotten older, I don't know if that's all right, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's a little less of the packages and the toys. Though, I mean, look, I see this Quill and this Moff Gideon. I'm like, yep, we're gonna have to get that, just like I have to get the Jar Jar and the Ventress and all those other ones. But yeah, I would hang that. That's a great. Put that in my kitchen.
Kitchen Bay 35 when you're in there making anything but clam chowder.
Yeah. The final one I want to talk to you about here is this 24 inches tall cuddle plush by Mattel of the child cuddling a space frog.
Mm-hmm.
We know he's going to eat. Unless this is him now post hanging out with the frog family where he has a new appreciation for life and has gone veggie. What do you think? I'm looking at it now. It's adorable. He's going to kill that thing.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly just looked at it and I shook my head and went here. Well, the whole frog thing, like the Black Series child comes with the frog and the ball. The ball is tiny. I'm afraid that I'm gonna accidentally choke on it.
Oh,
and I'm older than 3 years old. Yeah, I think there is just. I think that the child merch era that we're living in is really great because I think it is so foot on the gas, anything child, the same way that Phantom Menace kind of did with Jar Jar, that there's going to be some like weird, we look back and go, they made a what of the child? Doing what? With who?
do we have a child Pez dispenser that's like little frog shaped?
I really want that. I want some weird the child Pez dispenser.
That's awesome. So there you go. Mando Mondays, just another Mando Monday. A lot of plushes, some shirts, some jammies, and more than any other week, figures. Cool figures of cool characters, and that's part of being a Star Wars fan, is getting those figures. So that is our look at Star Wars news. We're going to take a quick break, a reset. Before we do, though, we got our audiobook recommendation for you all. Joseph?
Yeah, we are going to be discussing this one soon. It is a big one. There's a lot to discuss in it. So we are recommending the new From a Certain Point of View, Empire Strikes Back book. Many different stories, many different points of view.
Yes, it is on our review list. So catch up, get ready. As Joseph said, download your free audiobook today at audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Again, that's audibletrial.com/ForceCenter for your free audiobook. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side of this break, your questions and more here on ForceCenter.